King. Coming up on this morning show, a significant anniversary in the history of the city of Brighton, and we'll revisit an interview that talks about Brighton's rich history. First up, though, an independent candidate for Congress on WHMI's Viewpoint. We're talking with Cooper Nye, Michigan's youngest congressional candidate. You're running as an independent in the 11th District. And I guess the first place to start is, looking at your press release says the two-party system doesn't work for you, but I will. So as an independent candidate, that is something somewhat unique to see on the ballot. So what led you to this?
Absolutely. So I was inspired to do this after spending some time in D.C. They call it the swamp for a reason, and I just saw firsthand how the media and our politics sort of interconnect into this sort of dangerous dysfunction. So after 3 years of working in PR and policy there, I just sort of woke up to the popularity of these outsider candidates like Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, and decided that means, people are really fed up with these two parties. They don't feel heard. They don't feel like they're serving them. And they see that it's really the special interests that have a lock on it.
And so I think we hear, people that are, members of the Democratic Party or members of the Republican Party certainly have, made their choice. There's a lot of folks out there who aren't members of either party, but they tend to vote one party or the other exclusively. So you might say some would say I'm more liberal, so I'm going to vote Democrat. I'm more conservative. I'm going to vote Republican. So using those monikers, conservative and liberal, where do you fall?
So I tell everybody, I don't say I'm an independent to avoid telling people where I land on things. So in general, I consider myself a conservative. That's what took me out to Washington, D.C., actually. I interned for the Heritage Foundation out there, and I'm still sort of aligned with a lot of the principles, but I just, the Republican Party right now really stinks, so I can't really say that I want to join them at this stage. But I'm not alone in this. Actually, I just saw this morning, today, there's a new poll out from a Wall Street Journal that shows that right now neither party has a strong claim to be most in tune with Americans' thinking. It said about 52% of Americans said the Democrats are out of step with the thinking of most Americans, and 56% said Republicans are out of step. So that tells you a big sort of thing about the status of American politics right now. There's a huge middle of sensible people that are largely silent because it's the fringes that get all the airtime. But the reality is now more Americans identify as independent than either party. So there's a real opportunity in that, I think.
Now, you were able to get onto the ballot by submitting 4,000 signatures to the state. About 3,000 are required under state law for non-affiliated candidates. So in going about getting those signatures, what is it that, you were able to discern from people as you talk to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's just something I spent about 2 months doing. And so by going out there myself, because I did the petitioning, I didn't pay anybody to do it. So I really got to see face-to-face how people are feeling, what they're concerned about. And, in general, I would say there's about 60% of people are just like, finally, it's about time. People are exhausted turning on their TVs and just seeing the theatrics over and over from people who have more to gain by starting, a bickering match than actually doing their jobs and getting things done. So overall, it wasn't easy. You get a lot of flack, a lot of people ignore you, but ultimately it ended up being very encouraging because I would tell people, hey, I'm a conservative. If they're a conservative, sort of earn their trust, and if they're Democrats or they're a liberal, I would say, well, look, I may be a conservative, but here are a few things I think we can agree on. Campaign finance, ending gerrymandering. Big reforms that I think sensible people from both sides can agree on.
So in the race right now, the two candidates that you're running against are on the Republican side, Lena Epstein, and on the Democratic side, Haley Stevens, two well-funded candidates. How are you funding your campaign?
So individual contributions only. I'm taking no money from parties, no money from PACs, no money from unions or corporations. It's a real movement for people. And I'm not as well funded as these two, but then again, I'm not a millionaire dumping my own money into it, and I'm not a DC insider who's taking most of her campaign money from out-of-state sources. So I think in both cases, I'm clearly the choice that if people are fed up with, I'm somebody they can trust, because I actually want people's vote. My opponents seem to just expect it by spending on TV ads.
And so, as a self-described conservative, what's your answer been to Republicans, Republican voters, people who identify as Republicans, who say you're liable to take votes away from somebody like Lena Epstein and perhaps throw the race towards Haley Stevens? And they say, you're a spoiler. You don't really have a chance to win, so why would you allow a liberal Democrat to win a race? You have this ability potentially to throw the race one way or the other. What's your response when people say that?
Yeah, I'd say, usually it's not really a good challenge, because people from both sides actually say that. When I'm talking to a Democrat, they say, "Oh, you're just going to spoil it. You're going to give it to the Republicans." If I talk to a Republican, they say the same thing. "Oh, you're just going to spoil it. You're going to give it to the Democrats." So in both cases, they actually agree on something, and for them, that's fear. And I don't think that's a valid reason to say, don't stand up and fight for what you think is right, because that's just short-term thinking. How many times are we going to allow this pendulum to swing back and forth before enough people are just wake up and say enough? Because every time you elect a Republican or a Democrat, the other party usually ends up winning the following race. So I would just say, let's remember, we've done this before. How many more times do we want to try this?
So let's find out more about you as a candidate. You're a Walled Lake Western High School grad. You went to MSU, and you studied political theory and international relations. That's
right, yeah. So I'm a lifelong resident of the district. Grew up in Novi, Walled Lake schools, and then Michigan State, and just really, it's home for me. I really do love this state. I missed it a lot in D.C. People there are a little bit different than out here, but I figured it was time to come home and try and do something different, because people are clearly fed up with how things are going.
So you have a platform of several issues. Is there one issue above all that is really propelling you forward? Well, the one thing that you're most passionate about, that when you talk to voters, that you say, this is the thing I'm really working for?
Yeah, so the issue is just campaign finance, but the thing I'm all about is called the American Anti-Corruption Act. Now, I didn't come up with this. This was developed by some of the leading government reform experts in the country. But it would do a number of great things to get our government back to working for citizens instead of special interests. So for me, if you can reduce my candidacy to anything, it's reducing the power of politics and really putting that back into votes and people, rather than these special interests and political leadership that get to tip the scales with their deep-pocketed donors and political groups.
And so the rest of your platform, what other things are you advocating on?
So sort of hand in hand with the money in politics is just fixing our elections. Because, you asked me this question, how do you handle being a spoiler? And that's only the case because of the way that we have our elections. Like this winner takes all. Something I would like to see, and this would be done by the Fair Representation Act, is switch to ranked choice voting, where, say you have 4 options on the ballot, you number them in order of your preference, 1, 2, 3, 4. That way, you can pick who you truly believe is best, with the comfort of knowing that it'll balance out. And instead of that vote total electing one person, it would actually be multiple winners. And thereby representing, a real proportion of all the views of people, as opposed to having, a partisan take office and just having the other half of the district that doesn't like them just stewing in rage for a few years. So I think it's healthier for a democracy that way, or a republic, rather.
And so under ranked choice voting, now, and so correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is, so if there's 4 candidates, as you said, and you rank them in order of preference, that would lead to runoff elections?
I'm not sure if that's exactly, it's sort of case by case. And honestly, I don't know if that's the case.
Okay. My understanding was that, ranked choice voting is you could potentially have 2 candidates from the same party, because I think they're doing this in California. You could have 2 candidates from the same party in a primary, and then if they were ranked the highest, they would actually run against each other in the general.
Yeah, no, that's a great. You're right. It is similar to that, but because election laws are a state by state basis, we as Michiganders would be free to implement it as we see fit or as we see best. So I actually don't think California is a good model on this or anything, really. I don't want to make Michigan like California. But I do think that Maine is an excellent example of their ranked choice voting, because this was just done this year, and they're actually a prime example of the impact that independent legislators can have, even a few, because when they're running, the question is how do they win, but when they do, the question is how do they govern and what can they get done, and the answer is a lot. It's transform the function of Maine's legislature as it has in Alaska as well, and perhaps Washington, Colorado next year after this election. So there's a lot of sort of fascinating examples of things playing out right now as we speak.
So another thing that you talk about, and this is one kind of leaps off the page, is abolish the income tax. Certainly when you talk to people, no one is happy to pay their income taxes. But I think the initial thought might be, if we abolish income tax, how do we have services funded? So what's your push behind that?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody likes paying taxes. It takes time, it takes money, and you're being taxed. So I want to abolish the income tax for that reason. But to make up for that revenue, we'll just replace it with a national sales tax. And it'd be about 15%, maybe 18%, but in either case, that would make up and more for the loss in income tax. And the reason I put that out there is it's been thrown out there before by libertarian types like Rand Paul and Ron Paul. But I think this is something that the left could get on board with, because if you abolish the IRS, you abolish the income tax, and you replace it with a sales tax, not only are you giving workers a pay increase, but you're actually taxing consumption instead of income. So you're rewarding work while also effectively protecting the environment. So I think that's a unique way to put it for people. Because, as you point out, people get nervous about where's the money going to come from? How do we pay for services? I'm not trying to gut services. I'm just trying to help the American people, because it's apparent to everybody. Congress does not know how to spend your money. And
so the main criticism against that would be that it's a regressive tax. To have a sales tax, it would unfairly impact lower income, who are much more reliant on consumption costs, as it would people that are up or higher on the scale. So, how do you answer that?
Yeah, so it's a pretty simple fix for that, actually, because I want to avoid that. I'm conscious of that pitfall. So the simple fix is just tax vouchers, rebates, and you could set that. I don't actually have the number in my head, actually don't know what it would be, but I'd be willing to discuss it with anybody. Make sure that people below the poverty threshold or maybe a little bit above it aren't being taxed. So, I mean, it'd be a net positive for working Americans for sure, because we definitely want to avoid that type of regressive tax policy, and I think that's the way to get it done.
Well, we've got about a little less than 6 weeks here before the election, and well, I guess we got a little more than that actually, as we approach the election. So, as we come up on to November 6th, how do you plan to campaign? Are you out there every day? What's your main mode to get your message out?
Yeah, so right now it's a very shoestring budget, slim team, but we're energetic. I mean, we've got pep in our step because we really believe in what we're doing, and we're running up against these party machines. So we're focusing a lot of our efforts on digital and just word of mouth outreach. Calling friends, encouraging them to spread the word, whether it's by email, phone, or text, because it's really about people. I don't want anybody to feel forced to vote for me in the ballot box. I prefer for them to feel really good about sending a message to D.C. and picking no party affiliation this November, which is what I'll be listed as.
And you do have a website, coopforcongress.com?
That's right, coopforcongress.com. So, I mean, if anybody out there is sick and tired of these two parties, visit it, sign up for the email updates. They go out every week, and follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I mean, and share it, spread it.
All right, Cooper Nye, running as an independent for the 11th District Congressional seat. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, sir.